Hi, I'm Kemal.
And I'm Anthony.
And
This
is
the
K&A show.
Tonight's episode is the Second World War in review. Let's take a look. For tonight's first short story, Battle of Iwo Jima. After over 3 years of a gruesome war, in mid-February to late March of 1945, the Battle of Iwo Jima occurred. This battle over a tiny island in the Pacific was part of the United States strategy in the Pacific known as island hopping. However, this island was the first battle in which the Japanese fought on what they considered their homeland. This meant that the Japanese had even more incentive to give their lives for their homeland. This incentive, added with their samurai code of fighting, led to a nightmare for American soldiers. With that being said, American soldiers were able to persevere through the fight and win the battle. Now on to K&A WWII.
Thanks, Anthony. Now on to the horrors of the war in Europe. In late April of 1945, right before the death of Hitler and the surrender of Nazi Germany, Allied soldiers stumbled upon a concentration camp filled with Jews called Dachau. These U.S. soldiers were able to free 32,000 survivors from this camp. This was just one of many concentration camps found throughout Europe by the Allied forces. This one particularly located in Germany. Fortunately, in this case, there were survivors who were able to be liberated, which cannot be said for the other camps that were found. This is a horror that was unknown by the Allied forces and continues to be a major concern as more and more of these labor camps are popping up around Europe. Hopefully, this is the last of these terrifying camps, and if not, we know that Allied forces are going to make it a key priority to find and liberate each and every last one of them until all survivors are found and freed.
Thank you, Kemal. And for tonight's third short story, I would like to talk about Pearl Harbor. On December 7th, 1941, an ordinary American day, something terrible happened to the nation. That morning, the Japanese carried out an attack on the United States Naval Base at Pearl Harbor on the Hawaiian Islands. The Japanese were angered by the United States cutting off their oil supplies to Japan, and they also wanted to cripple the United States so they could not interfere with the Japanese mission to control the Pacific Ocean. The Japanese crippled the American fleet and upset and angered Americans all over the nation. Luckily for the United States, the Japanese missed the fuel supplies on the island, and only 2 ships were sunk as a result of the attack. After the attack, the United States rapidly began to rebuild and strengthen their Navy as they declared war on the Axis powers. Now back to K&A WWII.
Thanks again, Anthony. On June 6, 1944, 155,000 Allied troops landed on the beaches of Normandy, France, which would begin the liberation of Europe. Many brave soldiers died that day on the shores of Normandy, knowing very well that many of them would fall before taking the beach. The Nazis were prepared for this surprise attack by the Allied powers by scattering mines along the shoreline so that no tanks could advance onto the beach. German machine guns were also set up at the top of the beach to take out vulnerable and uncovered Allied troops. After a long and hard-fought battle, British, American, and Canadian troops were able to take control of the 5 beaches on Normandy, which stretched to roughly 50 miles. These successful attacks on the beaches of Normandy helped the Allies penetrate into Europe and began the end of Nazi Germany. And now for the interview segment of tonight's show. I am seated here with the 33rd President of the United States, Harry Truman, to talk about the end of the war and the atom bombs. Thank you for being on the show tonight, Mr. President. I know you've been busy lately.
Well, I'm certainly glad to be here, Mr. Kemal.
Okay, Mr. President, then let's begin. You've been getting a lot of criticism lately around the world about dropping the 2 atom bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What do you have to say to your critics?
I've said this time and time again, and I'll say it once more. My main priority and goal was to end the war as soon as possible by saving the most lives as I could.
Do you feel any guilt in dropping the first bomb over Hiroshima on August 6th? And if not, did you feel any guilt in dropping the second bomb over Nagasaki on August 9th?
I'll be honest with you. Even though my goal was reached prominently after the 2 bombs were dropped over Japan, I was astonished after seeing pictures of those cities. I mean, there were buildings, everything, but now there's just miles of empty land. But as I said, it needed to be done to bring an abrupt end to this war and to save millions of lives.
Well, Mr. President, what do you think this means for the future when it comes to world affairs? Do you think there should be legislation against the use of nuclear warfare?
Yes, I believe that this is a serious concern now. After seeing the damage the bomb has caused, I believe that there should be legislation denying the usage of atomic bombs. The disaster that follows after the bomb is used is one that should be avoided.
Well then, if it were necessary to the defense of the United States, would you use another atomic bomb?
There was really no way to tell what that situation would be like, but if it came down to it, there was no way to avoid it, I would have to use the bomb, Mr. Kevin.
Do you think it is possible for all countries to completely avoid the use of atomic bombs, with places such as the Soviet Union in the world?
I believe that if nations all across the world worked hard enough to stop the production and usage of atomic bombs, then globally atomic conflict could be avoided.
That's all for me tonight. Thank you for your time, Mr. President.
No, thank you, Mr. Kemmel. Thank you very much.
Tonight's editorial is on the dropping of the atom bombs over the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I must admit that even though the photographs that we've seen so far of the aftermath of the bombings have been quite shocking, I still believe that President Truman made the right choice for this nation by choosing to drop atomic bombs over Japan. The goal of many Americans, including Truman's, as heard just moments ago in our interview, was to bring this prolonged war to an end as soon as possible and to save as many lives as possible. Statistics also show that if the United States were to pursue an on-land attack opposed to the dropping of the atom bombs, around 1 million American soldiers would have lost their lives. This was the complete opposite of what Americans and President Truman wanted, so the only realistic way of saving 1 million American souls was by dropping the atom bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. America was able to also save millions of dollars in war spending by dropping the bombs than committing into a ground war. It is also for these reasons that I believe that President Truman was correct in his judgment when it came to how to end this war, and fellow Americans should be praising him for his tough decision-making skills and looking out for this nation's best interests.
And for tonight's main story, I'd like to talk about the photograph of the soldiers raising the flag on Iwo Jima. The island of Iwo Jima contained Mount Suribachi, a very sacred place of Japanese culture. The Japanese heavily guarded this mountain. When American soldiers took the mountain, a photograph was taken that would change the outlook on the war forever. 6 men were photographed raising an American flag on top of Suribachi. These men included John Doc Bradley, Hank Hansen, Ira Hayes, Rainey Gagnon, Franklin Sousey, and last but not least, Mike Strank. 3 of these men were killed on the island, and those were Hansen, Sousey, and Strank. However, the men in the photo had no idea what this one image could mean to the nation. People believed that the conflict in the Pacific was causing too many casualties and it should be abandoned immediately. When people saw the photograph of those 6 men raising the flag on Iwo Jima, they saw this war being won and that the Americans were triumphing. People took pride in this photograph as it swept even more patriotism throughout the nation. Americans were very proud of how they dealt with the Nazis in Germany, and now they can be proud of how they dealt with the Japanese in the Pacific. This photograph spread so much pride and gusto around the country that the men who were alive from the photos were sent back to raise money for the war effort. These men became celebrities of the war, but as most Marines and soldiers were, they all did not want the publicity or to be seen as heroes. They felt that they were not heroes for simply being in a photograph, and they felt that the real heroes, were those who gave their lives on the island. To wrap up our main story on the photograph that changed the war, we would like to thank all men who gave their lives in the war to protect our country. Wait, what's this? Okay, I'm getting news. It was Harlan Block raising the flag. He is also dead, not Hank Hansen. This is really upsetting. And now a word from our sponsors.
Do you ever feel parched on a hot sunny day?
I do.
Then I got something for you.
What?
Coca-Cola.
Coca what? Oh boy! Coca-Cola!